You are about to listen to the full interview with Chad Robinson. Sections of it were originally included in our Beast of Bray Road episode. If you haven't listened to the full episode, we recommend you go listen. It'll provide context for this interview. Chad Robinson is the director at the Matheson Memorial Library in Elkhorn. We spoke with him about the city of Elkhorn and Linda's lasting impact.
I'm actually not from Elkhorn or even from Wisconsin. I'm actually a native Texan. But we moved up here to work at the Brown County Library in Green Bay back in 2000. And when I was taking the job here in Elkhorn, one of the very first things, you probably know this, but one of the first things you'll find out about Elkhorn if you Google it is that we have a Beast of Bray Road. So for me, that was just icing on the cake. I thought that was pretty cool. So, and since I've been here, the Beast isn't like a real dominant factor in Elkhorn history or politics or anything else, but you certainly can't avoid him. So, and I had the pleasure of being able to meet Linda Godfrey several times. She was a member of our friends group at the library, and I've got my signed copy of her book right here. And so it was a real pleasure to get to know her.
For someone who's unfamiliar with Elkhorn, can you kind of just give me a description of the city and what it looks like? And
Absolutely. Yeah. Elkhorn is the county seat of Walworth County. So we're right in the center of the county. We're about 10,000 population. And before the Beast, we were known as the Christmas card town. Back in the 1950s, there was a show called March of Time that did an episode here about Elkhorn and its preparations for the annual Christmas parade, which still happens. And so a lot of those images were captured by the wife of one of the sponsors of the show, ExxonMobil. Her name was Cecile Johnson, and she was a pretty well-known painter. And she painted all of these images around town, and those ended up being on I think it was called the Standard Christmas Card Company. So a lot of times in the 50s and 60s, if you were purchasing Christmas cards, you were actually buying images of Elkhorn. Definitely is a larger town in Walworth County, but it has that very big small town feel. We have a lovely downtown. The library actually sits kind of kitty corner on the northeast side of our town square, and that's where the Christmas card or the Christmas card town parade happens every year, and pretty much all of the big civic celebrations. So it definitely has that classic Americana small town feel. And then there's Bray Road.
Yeah. When did you first move to Wisconsin? I'm just trying to figure out the timeline for when you became aware of the Beast, and then also when this Beast was very popular in the media.
So the Beast was very popular way before I got here. I think that the big sightings happened in late December of 1991. I myself moved to Wisconsin in 2000, and I moved to Elkhorn in 2015. I've gotten to know a lot of longtime residents of the town, especially with the library, but also with the Walworth County Historical Society. But yeah, so I came late to the party, as it were. But, you know, it's still a topic. As a library director, we maintain a kind of a file of Beast clippings to go with our grade or pamphlet file. And very often, or at least once a year, we have people coming from all over the country to come and see our files. Pour through the old copies of The Week and other articles that appeared. I think the last one was just a couple of years ago in the Independent, which is our town paper. So it definitely casts a big shadow.
Yeah, it's a shame I'm not closer. I'd love to come and take a look at those material myself. You mentioned Linda Godfrey. Can you give me just a quick introduction to who she was and what her relationship is to the story of the Beast of Bray Road?
Absolutely. Yeah. Linda Godfrey was a local resident. She lived in the town of LaGrange, which is just north of Elkhorn. And she worked as a journalist and a cartoonist for The Week, which is no longer around, but it was a freely distributed weekly paper. She was a very accomplished author. Her book is really well, no matter how you feel about the Beast, it is a really well-researched and well-written book. She also wrote an amazing book on a true crime case at the turn of the century in Whitewater called The Poisoned Widow. Really, really an awesome local author. Later in life, she really became the spokesperson of the beast. She continued on with her research. She would sometimes come to the library or the society to speak about her recent findings or to share her evidence that she'd found. And I mentioned before, she was a great supporter of the library. We were able to help her with some non-beast research and a good Friends member too. So it is a real shame that we lost her. But yeah, she's the one who kind of kept the flame of the beast alive, or really the go-to person, cyclically when someone would become interested, like yourself, then she would be the go-to person to speak to. So we miss her.
How did she first become aware of these stories of the beast? Where did those stories originate from?
So in her book and in person, she would tell you that it all began in late December with the Gibson and the Indrizi sighting. It was, as she says in her book, a slow news day when it came along, and she decided to pursue it. And more importantly, she drew a really cool, legendary picture of it in action. And that kind of started the whole phenomenon. She continued on with it for the next couple of years until she wrote her book, and really was able to do a lot of extra research and tried to, kind of connect other strange sightings in this area and statewide with other creatures that maybe fit the MO or the profile of the beast. And even, I guess, looked into a similar legend in our neighboring state of Michigan. The Dog Man of Michigan just became our Elkhorn's sole authority on cryptids, strange phenomenon, lycanthropy, I guess. So the whole thing. She really kept that dream to find out what's going on alive for many years.
Are you aware of her having an interest in these topics prior to the beast, or was this kind of her gateway to becoming interested in this topic?
I really don't know. I met her way after the fact, but I can tell you that, she was a firm believer in it, or believer in something out there. And so she was definitely big into still trying to find out the truth and working with other investigators and things like that. If you read her book, it sounds like, no, she didn't really have any interest in this. She just had a good journalist instinct when she found a hot story to really chase it to the ends of the earth. So
you had the opportunity to meet Linda in person. Can you kind of just give us a little bit of an overview of her as a person? What your first impressions are and kind of how you remember her?
Sure. Yeah. She wouldn't strike you as a werewolf hunter or a paranormal investigator. She was very sweet, very soft-spoken, very amiable, a big reader, obviously a big supporter of the library and of writing and being an author and research, but very gracious, a wonderful host, a great presenter. She had a way in her writing to kind of come off a bit tongue-in-cheek, so the book is accessible, to both skeptics and believers. In speaking, especially when I knew her, I think she had really come around to being a kind of a true believer, or maybe more of an apologist for the beast. So there wasn't really that much skepticism in later life, but personally, just a really wonderful person, very sweet lady.
And how do you think that this story that she reported on, how does it fit into the wider picture of Elkhorn's history? Is there any precedent for this legend prior to her reporting that you know about?
In terms of Linda's research, she did find other stories, and she's, found other witnesses. But from when I've spoken to locals, especially longtime residents, it really wasn't something that was on their radar. It was just as a surprise to them as it was to the world, I guess. And it really wasn't like a defining moment in their life or anything. It was just like, that's weird. And when you talk to people in Elkhorn, usually I would say 90% of people are probably skeptical, but they're not openly hostile to it. It's just kind of one of those interesting things that we're unique for. So yeah, I don't think there was a lot of people discussing it until the story broke.
Obviously, when the story broke, it brought a lot of attention globally to Elkhorn. How do you think residents feel about this being something that the town's so well known for? Do people celebrate it? Do they like it? Or are people are they over it?
It's a great question. I think for the most part, they've made their peace with it. Now, you'd probably get a different answer maybe from residents of Bray Road, but the town in general, it's really not discussed a whole lot except around Halloween. And, we kind of aid and abet that. We usually have Halloween programs at the library, and very often it'll be about the beast, or we'll, have other groups that have been searching for him come and talk about their findings. In regards to him becoming a figure of local pop culture, it hasn't really happened yet, but we're actually in the process. The library and the Elkhorn Rec Department is planning an event this October, and I got cleared to talk about this. It's going to be called Beast Days, and so it's going to be the week before Halloween, and we're going to tie in a lot of local businesses and different groups and programs, and it's going to culminate with a beast feast, like a little dinner with the rec department. And I'm told that the beast is going to be maybe a guest of honor there. So take that for what you will.
Is this planned to be something that happens annually from this point on? Is that the hope? That this event
That's the hope, yeah, that it's just like another annual tradition for everybody in Elkhorn, just to kind of acknowledge this unique part of our history and kind of celebrate it for what it is.
Would this be the only kind of annual event that happens that has the beast front and center in the event itself, or is there anything else that happens?
No, that's pretty much it. Like, kind of going back, it was a blip for most people in Elkhorn, and it just was, kind of didn't become a topic for conversation that lasted for years and years. And sporadically, if there would be another sighting, then it would kind of reignite. But I would kind of say the main or the default opinion of most longtime residents is a kind of relative ambivalence. So there hasn't ever been anything till those of us newcomers who have said, like, hey, let's sort of embrace this. It's kind of fun. At the time of the sightings, sure, one of the bakeries did make beast cookies. One of our local politicians used the beast to get elected. He did get elected, apparently. And there were other things. It was always very tongue in cheek, but it kind of fizzled out and has a tendency to fizzle out. But then there's a lot of people, even though Elkhorn is a small town, it is very welcoming to new people. And we have a lot of new people moving into the area. And, when they discover this, there's different stages: intrigue, mystery, let's go find it. Or, let's make that requisite drive down Bray Road in a moonlit night. Most people don't see anything. But so I think it's kind of as newer people come in, as younger people are growing up, it's something that's kind of maybe looked at a little bit fondly. So
you mentioned that most of the residents probably are pretty ambivalent about it, except maybe the residents who live along Bray Road. Can you maybe talk about some of the effects that happened during the media storm? And also, do they still have issues with people trespassing to this day, I suppose?
As far as I know, not as bad. I haven't heard our police chief describe any recent busts or anything, but I know during the time, and a little bit of background too, Elkhorn is very close to the Illinois border. And one thing you learn when you move here is there is a little bit of rivalry between the states of Wisconsin and Illinois. And the cliche is that, the people from Illinois come up from Chicago to, they visit our areas, are lovely. The Walworth County is a big tourist destination. We have Lake Geneva. In Elkhorn, we have the Lauderdale Lakes. In Delavan, there's Delavan Lake. When the story broke, there was a tale of a bar in Illinois that loaded up a bus and went on kind of a monster hunting safari, which, as you can imagine, didn't go over too well here in Elkhorn. And I know there have been instances of monster hunters who didn't get their hunting permit, if you will, that went out there and began tramping around Bray Road. And the thing to remember for all potential monster hunters is that most of that is private property. So, and there are more than a few houses. Some people are kind of let down a little bit when they drive down it and it's, well, this isn't that scary. Here's a nice farm, there's a nice field, and it is a pretty short road. But, I think every once in a while there might be an incident or two. But most of the investigators now will get permission, I believe, to kind of do a stakeout or, bring a piece of chicken to try to entice the beast to come out. So I don't think it's as extreme as it was during the height in that early 90s. I think it's calmed down.
You gave us a little bit of a picture of what it looks like along Bray Road and that it's not actually very spooky, but could you maybe just paint a little bit more of a picture of the road itself and the surrounding area? Are there woods nearby? Kind of like what's it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bray Road runs from just outside of town on the road to Lake Geneva, and it will go and eventually catch up to the highway that goes to Burlington. If you weren't aware of the history and it was a bright sunny day, you probably wouldn't know anything. It's just a pleasant country drive. There are a lot of farmhouses. There's a lot of cultivated fields, and there are, groves and copses of woods that kind of spread around it, and also some kind of low marshlands in some sections of the road. If you drove by it on a kind of a creepy, cloudy day or in the dead of night, like any country road, it can seem a little spooky. If you drive on it on a spooky day at night and you know about the legend, then you're looking back and forth trying to see if you can be a part of the legend. But it's actually a really pleasant, nice road with more than a few houses. And actually, one of the nice things is now when you drive down it, anybody can see the beast because a local resident has a large wooden sculpture of the beast, like rearing up. So everybody now is guaranteed to see it at least once.
You mentioned during the height there was a bakery that made beast cookies. Are there any other instances of things like that that the community has kind of adopted in a fun way to remember the story?
Nothing really that kind of stood the test of time. Things that kind of happened during the hype. There was a really popular t-shirt that incorporated Linda Godfrey's drawing. A couple of times, one of our local printers has resurrected that idea and sold it at different events. We just had a Bucks County Paranormal group there last April, and our friends group actually sold some of those shirts as a fundraiser. So that's kind of iconic. I think that picture alone is iconic, but I think that particular t-shirt was like a real kind of a real emblem of that time and what was going on. So
was there anything happening in Walworth County during this period that you think caused the story to become as big as it did? Was there anything happening during that period of time in the county or even maybe beyond the county in the world? Because the story did leave and kind of traveled around the world.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not aware of anything myself. And if you look at the headlines, like, for example, the big story that broke, that was not the front page. I don't think there really was a lot or any major issues or any kind of economic upheaval or anything outside of, what was happening in the country at large. I think maybe a part of it was how unexpected it was. You don't expect to, in a small Wisconsin town, to have a monster scare. That plus outside of this community, the uniqueness of the monster. It wasn't like a Bigfoot or a river monster. I mean, it's a full-on creature with the head of a wolf. I mean, a lot of people would say that's cool. I think that more than anything else is the reason it really became such a big deal. I don't think there was a lot else going on here, and maybe there wasn't a lot else going on around the rest of the country. So
you mentioned the Beast of Bray Road may have a cousin, the Michigan Dogman. Do you know much about that legend? I'm actually not very familiar with it. I'm curious to hear a little bit.
Really just from what Linda wrote in her book. It's, I guess there's a pretty big cycle of legends, and there's actually a song that one of the local radio stations in Michigan plays. And the creature is supposed to be like the Beast of Bray Road, where it's bipedal, hairy, and has, in this case, not really so much the head of a wolf, but more like the head of a large dog. And a lot of stories of loggers and campers and hikers being terrorized by this creature. And some of the stories are really scary. They're really good stories, but that's the extent of it. So I would, if anybody in Wisconsin or otherwise who's not in Michigan wants to pursue that, Linda has a whole chapter dedicated to it. So,
do we know who came first? Was it Michigan Dogman or was it the Beast of Bray Road? Do we know?
I don't know. Like, according to Linda's research, and she dug up quite a bit, she found a sighting of a beast-ish or Bray Road beast back in 1931, I think. and she found other stories like the Wild Man of LaGrange, and there was a creature that's supposed to be around East Troy, which is another community just to the north of us. And those go back very far into the 19th century. I'm sure Michigan could say the same. I don't know. I guess when you go looking for monsters, they're out there.
Are you able to recount any sightings or stories that you particularly enjoy about the beast?
I guess one of the scary stories that I heard involved the county DNR, the person whose job was to pick up. We have a lot of deer in this area, and they become a real traffic hazard. And so a lot of times when an accident happens, the deer carcass is left on the road until someone can come and collect it or tag it. And according to this story, the man drove up on his routine, just picking up these deer carcasses and put it in the back of his truck. And it was a dark night, and he got it back into the vehicle to tag or to log this thing. And suddenly he heard something jump into the back of his truck. And he looked back, and he saw the beast grabbing his deer, probably doing him a favor, I guess, and run off with it. So having it in the back of your truck and then running off into the night is pretty picturesque, at least I think. So,
have you met anyone local who's told you a sighting personally that they've had? Have you met anyone who's seen it themselves?
Not a lot, and just anecdotally, people have told me, maybe they've seen this weird shadow one night, or somebody told me that they saw when the corn during close to harvest season, like maybe in August when the corn is at the tallest around here, that they saw a wolf or coyote or dog sticking its head out of the cornfield, and they thought something was a little weird about it until they realized that maybe the head was sticking up way higher near the top of the corn, like it was standing up. Nobody who'd ever want to go on record, but little stories like that. If on a dark night somebody brings up the Bray Road beast, you might be lucky enough. Somebody says, well, oh yeah, my cousin saw it and here's the tale, or my relative had an experience where it chased his car or something like that. So
what sort of wildlife is in the area? Are there wolves and coyotes? Like what would people expect to find around there?
There are definitely coyotes in the area. Sorry, I'd say coyotes. I'm a Texan. It's coyotes, but there's definitely coyotes out there, and other, the usual suspects. We have possum, we've got raccoons and skunk, and an awful lot of deer. Also woodchucks. There's some beavers, maybe a few beavers in this area. Those are more up north, but nothing really outside of a coyote that would lead somebody to think it was something other than it was. So I guess that's one plus for the legend.
In your experience, like how many people do you think put stock in this being a real creature versus how many people just look at it as a fun legend? Is there?
I'd say them, and I can only speak for Elkhorn, but I would say the vast majority think of it as a fun legend. But at the same time, there are, and we respect them, of course, but there are people who have very deep convictions that the creature is real, that he's still active. So there are true believers out there for sure. And like I said, every once in a while, someone sees it and it makes the news, and so who knows?
Has there ever been any evidence that you're aware of in terms of like photographs or footprints or anything along that nature to support it?
Not really. There are stories in Linda's book, and Linda told me, because I asked this too, like, did anybody ever get the classic plaster cast, like a Bigfoot? But she said usually there were times when people claimed that they saw footprints, but either the footprints were not distinctive enough to warrant, going and grabbing your plaster of Paris, or that in the excitement, it just wasn't thought of to do. So I don't think there's really not a lot of physical evidence out there. There's no hair samples, there's no plaster cast. And as far as I know, there aren't any photographs for sure either. Now, there is a couple of photographs that appeared in a story a few years ago. And I'll let you be the judge of what it is. To me, it looks kind of like somebody threw a coyote because it looks like a coyote that's just vertical. But it's a little creepy. So we don't have anything like the classic Bigfoot video or anything like that. It's definitely more of something that's told from person to person. It's more anecdotal than anything else.
You mentioned that Linda uncovered a story that could stretch back as far as the 1930s for a sighting. Are you familiar with that story? Are you able to recount that encounter?
Vaguely, I don't remember the location. It was somewhere north of us, out of the area. And the story, from what I remember, it was handed down by a son about his father who worked, and it's a pretty creepy story. His father worked as a night watchman for a church cemetery. And according to the legend, he was on his rounds as a night watchman, and he suddenly saw a creature that fits the bill on a beast, so bipedal, hairy, with a wolf or dog head, that was kind of moving around a particular gravestone. I think according to the story, he freaked out. Who wouldn't? And he took off, but he decided to come back again, so good on him. And this time, he had a more one-on-one experience with it. He said the creature looked at him and growled something at him, made a word. And I think the word was Gadara. I don't remember. I have to read the book again. But the creature spoke to him, so that's new. And then he walked away from it, and it didn't pursue it. He never saw it again. And I think in Linda's book, she did find that Gadara was maybe tied into one of the biblical stories, maybe about the demoniac. Sorry, that's as far as I know. But yeah, so that it's a great story, and it happened a very long time ago. I want to say 31 or maybe 1929, but it's another good reason to go find her book.
How would you like the Beast of Bray Road to be remembered?
It's another good question. I would say, we live in a fascinating world, and the unexpected happens. And this one time, or these several times in our town, some people saw some strange things, and the world is a mysterious place, and I think that makes it all the more remarkable.
Do you believe in the Beast of Bray Road?
What's the X-Files thing? I want to believe. I think as a figure of folklore, it's part of our county and our city's history, and a very unique thing. I personally have never seen it. There are a few skeptics on my staff, that will tell you well, there's no reason to believe it's out there. But hey, again, this is a mysterious world, and don't we love our mysteries? So,
are there any mysteries in the region or other legends that you think parallel or come close to the prominence that this story's had?
We have some fascinating histories in our city's history, but none of them with this supernatural kind of quality to them. We've had murder mysteries here in the city of Elkhorn, both solved and unsolved, and interesting things and interesting visits. But as far as I know, this is our only, or this is the closest thing to our kind of city's ghost story. So yeah, at least I'm not aware. But remember, I've only lived here for 10 years or so. And so I don't know if maybe around the fire at some of our longtime residents, maybe they do have other stories. But without Linda, we probably will never know. So,
is there anyone who's kind of taken up the mantle since Linda's passing of being the Beast of Bray Road expert in Walworth County? Is there anyone that's kind of the go-to?
I don't think so. I think that she was pretty much irreplaceable. There certainly isn't anyone, that is a native to this area that's kind of become, the keeper of the beast's secrets, at least not that I'm aware of. But, as you know, there's still a lot of people outside of this community that are really fascinated or find this legend compelling. So I'm sure that, there'll be other people to take up her research. I don't know if they're going to have that unique vantage point that Linda had as a resident with a long history here, and her journalistic skill of getting people to open up about it. So I guess only time will tell, but I'm kind of suspect that maybe Linda was really one of a kind on this.
Can you tell me a little bit about how the story spread beyond Elkhorn and the media attention that followed it?
Well, from my understanding, or at least according to the book, really what happened is the sightings in '91 were picked up by the National Wire. And I think first it went into the tabloids, and then later it was picked up by regional news stations. And then it kind of became something that I guess, devotees of cryptozoology or the unexplained really kind of latched onto. I know there was another wave of publications in specific, magazines that deal with the occult or the unknown. So I think it's just such a unique story. People really felt compelled to share it. It's crazy when you hear it, like there's a werewolf type creature running around in rural southeastern Wisconsin. But yeah, I think it just kind of captured the imaginations of a lot of people. And I think it still captures the imagination of people when they find out about it. It certainly captured mine when I had not heard of it. I knew nothing really about Elkhorn until I moved here. And I'll tell you, that's the first thing that you find out. So at least if you Google it. So yeah, I think that just the sheer uniqueness of the creature and the sightings and everything just made it the perfect news story.
You mentioned the library keeps an archive of some of the material that's been published on the beast. Can you talk about kind of what's included in that archive? And if someone ever wanted to visit it, is there a way for them to do that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's part of our nonfiction collection. We have a large set of file drawers where we have clippings of interesting stories from Elkhorn and from Walworth County. And some of the bigger stories have their own folder. So this one has its own folder. It consists of photocopies of those articles written by Linda Godfrey in the week, some articles that appeared in our local paper, The Independent, and some other just interesting tidbits that we found, like when someone is making a documentary about it, there's usually an article, so we'll toss that in there too. It's by no means exhaustive, but whenever we do come along or when we find out about a story, we usually make a copy and put it into the file, like we would with any other interesting thing from our local history.
Is there anything we haven't touched on in regards to the story that you would like to share with people who maybe are learning about for the first time?
Not really. I think those are the particulars. I will say that our Walworth County Historical Society does also have its own folder, but it's kind of the same thing. So if you're coming down to Elkhorn to hunt the beast, get permission first. But also, if you want to do some research, we're happy to have you at the library. We're also happy to have you at the History Center, which is just on the other end of the square in the old City Hall. That's where the Walworth County Historical Society keeps their archival material.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcasting app. It helps get this content in front of more listeners, which means we can produce more episodes more often. Visit our website at www.strange-phenomenon.com for a full list of sources and more episodes. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at strange_phenom and on Facebook at Strange Phenomenon, all one word. Strange Phenomenon is hosted by Ray Tarara. It's written and produced. Additional music provided by Sergey Cheremisinov, Paramonk.